Yo, you can't see me. Yo, I wanted to make a little video. I've been thinking about this for a long time about hate the sin, love the sinner. And there's a whole heap of discussion, debate around that. People say, no, you got to hate the sinner, citing imprecatory prayers in the Psalms. Um, Saying no, you got to hate the person, but then on the other side, the people will draw the case of, and I'm often of the persuasion of the words of our Lord that we are to be as our heavenly Father, who shows good to the just and the unjust alike, and to be merciful, to love even our enemies. And so I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think it comes down to, I think by God's grace, I've understood how we can look at the distinction, and it comes down to separating, because this is the thing: can you separate the sin from the sinner? And I think it's not a case of separating the sin from the sinner; it's a case of separating the belief, the ideology, or the lie, really, from the sinner. Um, because we all look at this, right? We can all understand and agree that concepts, ideas, messages, different things permeate through life, like ideas, like uh, swearing, or you know appreciation for color, appreciation for art, or certain art trends in culture, trends in society. Those things pass down and permeate through even like philosophies. You see people holding to philosophies, and it passes down through families, and it passes down from culture to people, and it goes all throughout society. Those things exist outside of the people that either originated them or perpetuated them, because they outlive those people and get passed down. So you have to some degree, acknowledge, right, that ideas and beliefs, etc., um, are not separate entities, but they are separate from the people who originate and perpetuate them. So when we understand that, the idea that of safety, different safety protocols that get taught to people that then get passed down, things like common sense, or even things like folly, get passed down generationally or culturally, depending on practice and all these different things. Um, those ideas themselves exist separately from the people, the vessels, which perpetuate them or originate them or even oppose them. They exist separately, and so in some senses you have to separate the ideology from the person, even though that person might be in, you know, um, voicing and expressing that ideology, or that ideology might be embodying itself in that person or in that person's practices. Um, you still have to separate them, because that person will die and it will still exist in the world. They can write books or pass it on to other people, or it can just spread through other means or exist on its own, from other means like, philosophy or old philosophers, whatever. That idea can still exist when that person dies. Um, Likewise, you can kill that idea, and that person can still live on, or that culture, that human being, etc., can still live on. You can, with reason and by God's grace, change their mind. That idea will be, defeated. And this is what we see when Paul says um, we take every thought captive. Not necessarily referring to his own thoughts in his mind, but I believe he's talking about thoughts in principle, taking thoughts captive, ideas and ideologies that were exalting themselves against God and the knowledge of Christ, taking those captive and bringing them into subjection under Christ, destroying, false philosophies and, false logic or false reason or just general lies against the knowledge of God, taking them captive, destroying them. You can destroy those ideas and ideologies in a person by God's grace and with truth, and then they'll keep living. Even though that thing has been destroyed and killed, at least in regards to them, speaking subjectively of them, it's done, it's destroyed. They'll still keep living. And so to a degree, I mean, not even to a degree, you have to a degree, acknowledge that they're separate. Those people who perpetuate them, who act in accordance with them, just as we know that people will be judged according to what they say, what they think, and what they do, according to what kind of fruit that they've borne in those three, offices of humanity. Those people will be judged according to what they've done. So no doubt, indeed, they'll be judged by what they've done, and those ideologies, indeed, will play a factor in that. I think being able to see the two sides is crucial to balancing this whole dilemma of, well, do you hate the sin and hate the sinner, or do you love the sinner, but then how do you love a sinner but still hate sin if they're a sinner? You recognize that they are indeed fallen from what God intended. Okay, not simply fallen, but fallen from what God intended. Seeing them as God has created them to be in His image, and seeing the lies, which presently usually is the thing that's afflicting the person, afflicting the Christian from loving that sinner. It's usually the grievous lies or malpractice which they are confronted with that makes it hard to love them. Seeing that false lie or practice as what it is, really it's evil manifesting itself in different ways, and distinguishing evil from fallen creatures. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that there is a separation from evil and fallen humanity, because there is none who does good. It's simple as that. But I think when you recognize that not only is humanity the perpetrators, but they're also the victims, I don't know, I keep coming back to it's an important distinction to make, and that's why I think there's even more judgment on those who originate and intentionally perpetuate false ideas and whatnot, than those who are simply led astray by them and led into destruction or sin or folly. Those who are teaching and advocating and founding these false ideas, every lofty thought and false thing that opposes the knowledge of God, those ideologies themselves are, well, they're far worse than the human themselves. I think I'm willing to make that statement. Those ideologies, those sin ideologies, things like evolution is a fundamental, principle seen all throughout the fallen world, that in principle that a being can advance beyond its level of existence and honor through its own means and activities, right? Satan tempted Adam and Eve by saying, if you eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, you'll be like God. So you are currently here, and by saying that God knows that if you eat of it, he's tempting Adam and Eve to think that God doesn't want you to be like him. He wants you to be down here. Essentially saying that your status is here, not as like God as you may desire, but if you eat of the fruit, you'll be like God, a higher status, knowing good and evil. Essentially tempting them with godliness. I mean, being like God, but not through God's means, but through their own means and the works of the devil. through his means, not God's means. And so that lie of evolution, I mean, it literally is the lie of evolution. The fall in the garden principally was the same as evolution, that by a creature's own means and just, time, whiffy waff, whatever, their genetics just increased and got better, that they over time started breeding with more genetic features rather than less, and that their genetic mutations were increasing in ability rather than decreasing. Look, I'm no geneticist, but their principle is that a creature can advance beyond its own status and existence by its own means with no exterior influence. That in and of itself is the principle behind the fall and evolution. That is what I mean when I'm talking about a fundamental sin ideology. Those principles exist throughout the world, and it's the principle that's getting used to push transhumanism, that humanity can ascend beyond its current level of existence through the next evolution. They're literally using the word evolution, saying that if we reach out our hand again and take from that which is forbidden, this technology that's supposedly going to make our bodies better and greater, and it's like the next enlightenment, we're going to be so advanced, we're going to, surpass the limits of what we've been created into. These are all things that they say and claim. That it's again the lie of evolution. Those types of ideas, and there's many of them. The same way that we've got doctrine in the light and the truth, there's doctrine amongst demons. These are demonic doctrines, what I've just said, that are being used in the world, and they are disgusting. Those are the things which destroy societies. Once they enter into people's minds, they poison them. They destroy their way of thinking. They darken their perception of the world around them and the realities that they interact with, making it about them and about money, about this life only, to ignore spiritual realities. I mean, literally the idea of evolution, I believe when that was being pushed as a scientific ideology, which it's now being recognized as actually unprovable, and a lot of scientists are even turning away from it. At the time, it did so much damage. I mean, you sort of see the age of intellectualism riding on the back of evolution, and this sort of attitude that religion is outdated and restrictive, and that it's polluting the minds of humans, and we need to really switch on and engage our rational side and start accepting the ideas of evolution, and be more scientific. It destroyed people. It destroyed cultures. And you see that when that started getting accepted into the Western world that we saw formated on the back of Christianity, like the Western world, such as America, Australia, UK, England, whatever, that once that idea of evolution and this modernistic, postmodern attitude comes in, it just sort of sweeps out, as it comes in, religious attitudes. It really is a poison. It's disgusting, and it's so powerful, and it's so deadly. That is what Paul talks about, I believe, when he says that we take every thought captive. These thoughts, they're not just like a thought that pops into someone's head. The ideologies, I believe, my interpretation, he's referring to ideologies, thoughts that permeate through societies, that permeate and perpetuate throughout the world, that really oppose themselves against the knowledge of Christ. That's, I believe, what he's talking about. Those ideologies and ideas, lies, what they are what we recognize, I suggest, as we recognize as being separate from the sinner. Not that that sinner does not engage in, fall victim to, or perpetuate the lie, but that we recognize that human being, that the person we're dealing with is a sinner, and see still, though, the light of the nature of God's handiwork in them. That we see that they have been given a conscience, that they've been given a mind, emotions, that they have a family, that they are a human being. I think it comes down to recognizing not only that when we deal with other humans, unbelievers and Christians, that we're dealing with physical humans created in God's image, at the same time as spiritual beings fallen and subject to the law of sin. I think that's the important distinction, is separating the human aspect from the spiritual aspect. Not saying that we don't recognize the spiritual when we look at the humanity. We look at them both. And if we're true Christians, reconciling the divinity of Christ and the humanity of Christ, then we ought to be able to recognize and distinguish and accept, to reconcile the humanity of unbelievers and the spirituality of unbelievers. And I think when we balance that, we'll be rightly balancing as well how to hate the sin and love the sinner, and to be merciful as God has called us to do, yet to uphold justice. I think that's how we do it. I hope this is helpful, and if it's not correct, let me know. But I'm confident to say that. Yeah, hope it's helpful.